Radharani ki jai, Navadita Mayapur Nam ki jai, Jai Shri Chaitanya Saraswati ki jai, Jai Bhakti Yoga Shri Chaitanya Saraswati ki jai, Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Jai O Premanandi,
Jai Sripad Bhakti Yoga Puri Maharaj ki jai,
Jai Gaur, Jai Gaur. Was the song we chanted that before? That's the Panchakata Maha Mantra, and the other one we were chanting is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Are you familiar?
A little bit, yes.
Where did you just come from? You saw our advertisement, or?
I was here for there was like a sound meditation I found.
I'm sorry?
There was a sound meditation I found on Facebook, and so now I come here multiple times.
Very good.
He brought me.
You're a father.
No.
You're a friend.
Just a friend, too.
Okay, good to have both of you.
Are you local people from Princeton?
Yeah, we're members of Integral Yoga at Princeton.
Okay. I'm not from there.
Oh,
Interview. What's your name?
I'm John.
John.
Yours? Ron.
Ron.
Oh, nice. You're all students?
I go to Westminster Choir College. So. Yes,
What do you study?
vocal performance, so like classical singing.
Oh, singing.
Yes,
That's
yes.
wonderful.
What did he say?
Classical singing.
Like
Oh,
opera,
classical. Okay.
ideally.
You do different ragas?
I started learning Indian classical singing, kind of. And my teacher unfortunately had to back out, but so now I'm trying to find a new teacher. It's a little bit daunting. So.
Nice.
Are you,
Saregama Padani.
Hmm?
Saregama Padani.
are you Indian by ancestry?
No, but I.
Looked like you might have been, but I wasn't
Oh,
sure.
I was adopted from Russia, so
Oh.
European. So
Okay.
maybe.
So it's chanting called Kirtan. What we do when you sing together, it's called Kirtan. You're familiar with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever done it before?
Absolutely,
Yes?
yes.
Okay. Do you have to do it at the Integral Yoga?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A lot,
good.
yeah. He
Yeah,
leads
that-
it. So
I'm sorry?
he leads Kirtan.
Is he?
He leads Kirtan.
I lead Kirtan many times there.
He's leading.
Oh, he's leading the Kirtan.
Yeah.
Okay. Which Kirtan do you do?
Oh, boy.
You know Chaitanya Mahaprabhu?
We do. It's from Master Shivananda's.
Who?
Master Shivananda.
Shivananda.
Oh, Shivananda.
Yeah. But we're Swami Sat-cit-ananda is our guru, and he's a disciple of Master Shivananda. But most of the chants we do.
Yes. Sat-cit-ananda, he's here in the U.S.?
He left his body in
Oh, I see.
2003 or 2004.
This Swami Sat-cit-ananda is the one who started this integral yoga.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Well, we're chanting from the teachings, according to the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He appeared, it was an incarnation of Krishna, appeared about 500 years ago. And he inaugurated, actually, the modern method of chanting Sankirtan. He called it Sankirtan. And Sankirtan means Kirtan, San means with others, especially, but specifically with a sadhu, with a saint. Kirtan's with a saint that has transcendental benefit for everyone concerned. And the purpose of chanting is to awaken your love for Krishna.
Yes.
Because the name Krishna and Krishna, the Supreme Person, are identical. When you're chanting the name Krishna, you're associating with Krishna. And Krishna means who attracts. Karshana. Karshana is the root. Krishna has its root as Karshana. Karshana means to bring together, to attract together. Something like gravity. Right? Gravity attracts everything together toward the center of gravity, center of mass. So that Karshana, Krishna, he is the center, he is the attractive force in the whole of creation. Therefore, he's the unifying force. Okay? And that unity is called love. Not just a force. Not some magnetic force or anything like that, but the force, the attraction of love, beauty, charm, and sweetness. That's Krishna. He is of that. He has those qualities: sweetness, beauty, charm, knowledge, wealth, renunciation, wisdom. Everything is found in Krishna. And therefore, we're attracted. We see somebody wealthy, somebody powerful, somebody who has a lot of knowledge. We're attracted to them. So that is found in fullness in Krishna, the Supreme Person. And so automatically we're attracted to Him. We're unified. We want to unify our hearts and our minds and our lives with Him. So by chanting this Hare Krishna mantra, because He's present in His name, we feel that attraction in all of hearts. And somehow, even without any effort on our own, or without any will on our own, we just feel that attraction. And it develops within us. So that's the power of chanting the holy name. He gave this process. He said, very difficult to practice yoga. And this is called Kali Yuga. This age, it began about 5,000 years ago. Kali Yuga is a very difficult age for people to develop spiritual qualities. As we can see, so many things going on that are unspiritual, quite the opposite, and quite disturbing to anyone who wants to practice spiritual life. So he gave this very easy process to us. You poor folks, I realize the difficulties you're having, but here, the simple thing, if you can just do this one thing, then you can get immense, topmost spiritual benefit. So we make that the center of our teaching, of our lives, and Mahaprabhu taught. There's a picture of him and Nityananda Prabhu. Nityananda Prabhu is his associate, and in Krishna Lila, Nityananda Prabhu is Balaram, who is the brother, older brother of Krishna. And so he came, like I said, Krishna incarnates in the world many times. He came as Ram, he came as Buddha, he came as Matsya and Kodama, so many different incarnations. So his most recent incarnation, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, was to specifically teach for the Kali Yuga, the chanting of the holy name. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nisteva, 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 Gatiranyata. He's saying Hare Nama means the holy name. And he says it 3 times. When something is said 3 times in the Vedic literature, then it's very important. So he's saying Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevala. The only thing in this Kali Yuga is the holy name. That will save you. Kalo Nisteva, Nisteva, Nisteva. And then he says Nisteva, Nisteva, Nisteva. It means there's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. So again 3 times. Don't try to think you can accomplish what you can get from chanting the name by any other means that Nisteva can means by karma, by jnana, or by yoga. Not other ways. Don't try to practice karma yoga. Don't practice jnana yoga. Don't try to practice Sangha yoga. They won't, they're good for so many different things, but you won't get that perfection you'll receive from chanting the holy name. Like that. Those things are found in the scripture, and those are the things that was taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so we find that in our own lives, it's affecting us. We are now able to renounce so many materialistic things, take up the dress and the life of a sannyas for a brahmachari, and somehow make our life successful, at least from a spiritual perspective. And the material perfections of life, they're temporary. They may become rich or famous or whatever, but you're going to die. And the next life, you don't know what you're going to have, according to your karma. So by taking up spiritual perfection, we can get free from the cycle of birth and death. And actually get moksha, liberation from that. And not only liberation is sort of like a midway point. If we consider material existence to be the plane of exploitation, where we think everything is for myself, or for ourselves, from a singular or collective point of view, we have an egocentric type of, or extended egocentric type of mentality that's exploiting the environment. So those who try to rise above that to the plane of renunciation, that's a middle point. Beyond the renunciation, there's another plane, That's the plane of devotion, of love, of dedication, service to Krishna, and service to one another. And that plane is there also. It's a plane of consciousness. This is a plane of consciousness. That is also a plane of consciousness. This chanting also helps to develop that higher consciousness, that devotional consciousness. And it happens, like I said, by the magic, by the mystery, by the inconceivable potency, the name. We don't do it. He does. By the potency that is there in the name Krishna. Ra is also means the energy of Krishna. Hare Krishna, and then Ram. Rama is not Ramachandra, and Ram means the pleasure potency. Ramananda, the pleasure potency of Krishna. Ladini potency, called in Sanskrit. And that pleasure, that is not the pleasure of mundane pleasure, of mundane joy or satisfaction, but the pleasure of devotion, of sacrifice, of surrender, of giving oneself. And there's a pleasure in that. Surrender and sacrifice and service. Sometimes there's more pleasure in serving than being served. You find more joy. When you're feeding others, there's a certain joy to that. And when you're feeding them prasad, that's a perfect joy. Because when you're feeding others, there's karma. It's called good karma. They get some good karma. Then you'll have to come back and they have to feed you. So that's not the best thing to do. Not the most perfect thing, let's say, to do. But when you're giving prasad, you're distributing Krishna's mercy. Prasad means the mercy of the Lord. When you're distributing Krishna's mercy, then Krishna is very pleased with you and he takes you upward to his plane of dedication. No more karmic reaction, and then be action and reaction. So we want to try to do that. And that whole process of always engaging in devotional activities is called Bhakti Yoga. So you have karma yoga. You know what karma yoga means?
Yeah.
It means doing something and then getting a result for it, right? Like going to work and getting paid. Something that's karma yoga. And jnana yoga is trying to figure everything out, and not really doing anything, but just it's like this and like that, what's this, what's that. And you're sitting there not doing really much, just kind of a detached position. I mean, it's useful, it's helpful. But at the highest plane is when you know that you can't figure it all out. It's impossible. It's all inconceivable. It's all going on by some magical mercy, mystical process. And you can see that and realize that and know that the real satisfaction, fulfillment of your life comes in loving that higher plane, loving that divinity. Then you become happy. Then you become fully satisfied. Then you can experience ananda. Sat-cit-ananda. Eternity, knowledge and bliss. Sat-cit-ananda. Eternal blissful knowledge. How to engage in that Bhakti Yoga as the totality of your existence. That's what we study and we try to practice. By chanting the names, by hearing, just like here we're at this is called Sadhu-Sanga. Sadhu-Sanga, where we hear from the devotees and learn about Krishna, and learn about spiritual life, and learn about devotional service. That's called Shravanam. And then we chant. That's called Kirtanam. So Shravanam and then Kirtan. First we hear, then we can say, first we hear, there's Krishna. You can chant Krishna. And say, Hare Krishna. That we hear and then chant. Shravanam, Kirtan. And then comes Smaranam. Smaranam means remembering. When the kids go to school in the old days, they would sit down and say 1 + 1 is 2, or 2 × 2 is 4, and 3 × 3 is 6, and they just repeat and hear it from the teacher and then repeat it. And by hearing and repeating it, one day when you're talking to the kids, you say, how much is 4 × 4? And they'll say 16. They don't even know where it came from. But they remember it because they were hearing and chanting. So from Shravanam and Kirtanam, from hearing and chanting, comes Smaranam, remembering. And if you're talking about Krishna, it's Vishnu Smaranam or Krishna Smaranam. You remember Krishna. And Krishna Smaranam, remembering Krishna all the time, is called Krishna consciousness. What you remember is what you are conscious of. Your consciousness is filled with what is the most memorable thing in your life. What is the most central thing of your memory. That's called Krishna consciousness. Smaranam. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, then comes Padasevanam. Padasevanam means very humble service. That you understand there's something higher than yourself, and that you are part of that. But what way are you a part of that? As a servant. You are not the supreme. You are not the divinity. You are a humble, subordinate, and a loving part of that. And He is loving to you also. The world isn't meant to make us miserable. The whole creation wasn't meant to make us miserable. He had a beautiful purpose in it. All the food that has given us, the air, the water, everything is there. The other people, they're not meant to torment us. We have created that kind of environment for ourselves by forgetting that. By forgetting our loving Creator, how much that was an act of love, not an act of torment or punishment. We have left Him, that consciousness, and therefore we find ourselves in the suffering business because that's not our natural condition. We're not naturally meant to be detached from that divine flow that we are part of, and that has made the whole thing possible. We're not meant to be apart from that. Not meant to forget that. Not meant to be in the consciousness of always taking, exploiting the environment that's around us. We're meant to be affectionate and loving as much as that affection and love is coming to us from that higher source. So that Padasevanam means when we come to that realization of that divinity that is surrounding us and that our whole being is situated in, then we try to establish our serving relationship, loving service relationship. In the pada means the feet, in a very humble way. We want to serve the feet at the lowest position. We don't want the biggest position there. Oh, I am the servant of God. No, not like that. In a very humble way. Pada serving at the feet. Pada and then Archanam. Archanam comes when we make an altar. And we bring flowers, we offer incense, we prepare foodstuffs and offer them to the Lord. Make flower garlands, whatever. So many different ways of serving. It's called Archanam. Archanam means worshiping. And Vandanam. Also comes Vandanam. Vandanam means praising. People used to call it praying. But when you say praying, they mean, dear Lord, give me this, give me that. Praising. Prayer means praise. Praise the Lord. Praise, given everything to us. Without you, nothing would be possible. There would be no meaning to anything. So Vandanam means praising the Lord. So many praises we find in the scriptures. Praising the Lord. You don't find condemnation like a word there. These are the rascals that are condemning. But the saints, they praise the Lord. Thank you so much for your mercy. And then Vandanam, then Dasyam. Dasyam means becoming a servant. Actually taking up the service of the Lord, serving the devotees of the Lord, or serving the Lord by direct means of using your body, your mind, and your words. Everything to be used in service and not to be used for other purposes. When you dedicate your whole life, everything, as a servant of the Lord, humble servant. I am yours, your will, thy will be done, not my will. How do I do your will? And that we find help. The devotees who are also engaged in that activity. By serving the devotees who are also engaged in that activity, we can get a real and a substantial place in service, the service world, the service consciousness. So, Vandanam, Dasyam, and then Sakyam. When that mood of servitorship actually further develops, we feel ourselves to be friendly to the Lord, and the Lord friend to us. higher position, a more intimate relationship grows, connection with that plane. Sakyam, that's called Sakyam. Dasyam, Sakyam, and then the highest position, Atmanivedanam. Total surrender to Krishna. Every particle of your body is attracted and engaged in the service of that highest plane. Nothing left aside. We don't want anything to do with affairs outside of Krishna. Outside of Krishna's satisfaction, his pleasure. All of that is finished and annihilated as Atmanivedana. Who has come to the perfect focus, perfect attention, perfect consciousness? But Krishna is the supreme and the only focus of our lives. However, nothing else has a priority or a chance to enter into that. That's samadhi. That's samadhi. Not that you just sit there and close your eyes and everything is finished. Samadhi is full of life, full of perfection, full of engagement. Unadulterated. So that whole process from Shravanam to Atmanivedanam is called Bhakti Yoga. There's the different processes, the different limbs of Bhakti Yoga. Just like in yoga, you have different stages. Pratyahara, Dhyana, and all these different stages, right? Samadhi, in Bhakti Yoga, we have this Shravanam, Kirtanam, in a very lively and personal way. We engage in all these activities and make progress in our spiritual. Very nice and very beautiful and very happy process. There are many different ways of being engaged in Bhakti Yoga. I am a scientist. I have a scientist background. Or these Maharajas also. So we're organizing a scientific conference for the scientists. Well, scientists are very difficult to get to understand God. They're all atheists, basically. And they think everything can be manipulated by their molecules and whatnot. So, how to save them? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came. He wanted to save everyone. He didn't want to exclude anyone from Krishna consciousness. You're all Krishna servants, but you've forgotten, especially in this Kali Yuga. So now how to bring them back to understanding and know them? One of the most difficult groups is the scientists. How to bring them to understand these things. So we are engaged in organizing conferences. The Maharajas are from India. I'm from this side in the U.S. We're trying to engage them in some kind of spiritual quest. Rather than just inquire about molecules. How to get them to understand, to inquire about, could it be a scientific endeavor to try to understand God, or try to understand? Yes, there's a very clear understanding of these things from the Vedic literature. Many religions we don't find it very clear. It's just kind of helping people who are, sincere and humble in their own endeavors, but not so able to understand more scientific things about. But Vedas have very deep and elaborate descriptions of these things, the yoga process and everything. And that knowledge is there about this hierarchy. So we're trying to introduce that to the scientists by using science. Because we're trained as scientists, we can use that science, how to guide them in that direction, how to understand those things in a more way that's amenable to their thinking. And Krishna Kesava here, he knows something about this sound therapy. So he's using that also. And our Lochan Prabhu, he's a scientist at Princeton. And he is using it in astronomy or cosmology. He's trying to use that now, how to bring people. So whatever walk of life you're in, Madhava Prabhu, he's driving everyone crazy. He's driving us, driving the devotees around. And because they don't know how to drive. In India, they don't have any, so they needed someone to help them be able to preach and spread this message. So he has kindly, very humbly accepted to help them and bring his purity, his pure heart and devotion to us all. It's like that. Whatever you do, whatever your inclination or inspiration to do in this world, you can somehow dovetail that in the service of Krishna. And in that way you can also become a Bhakti Yoga, a Bhakti Yogi, and make progress in spiritual. That's all. Very simple.
It's interesting. I was watching for a while videos on science and such. And
Sorry.
I was studying.
A little louder, but
okay.
I have a hard time hearing.
I was studying or watching some videos by scientists, and there's a Dr. Ed Whitten here.
Edwin Bryan?
Ed Whitten.
Edwin.
Yeah, he's a string theorist physicist at Princeton, and I was listening to some of his talks, and he did a short 10 or 15 minute talk on science and consciousness,
Wow.
which to me was very interesting because it really brings together what you're talking about, and he essentially threw up his hands and said, science can only get you so far. They can't come to sort of the basis, which, I mean, in Vedanta it's consciousness that is the basis for all of this, and that's where science really breaks down and can't sort of bring that. They can't explain it, and it was very interesting to me to see him talk about it that way. And it's like people ask all the time, you know, you can identify all these particles and strings and all of that stuff, but can't explain what underlies it. And it was kind of cool to see a scientist, and very renowned. I studied with him when I was at the university also. And he's brilliant and has made great leaps and bounds in string theory. But when it comes to that level, it's just like, I don't know. And
That's why, Namaste, Hare Krishna. That's why we call our conference, actually, it's called Science and Scientists. And the underlying theme is scientists can explain science, but can science explain the scientist? Scientists know how to talk about science, they tell us what science is, but can that science explain what the scientist is? I have this saying here, we say life comes from life, and that all the science and all the scientists together cannot make a single blade of grass because they don't know what life is. Life is also there. Life is also there in the blade of grass. Consciousness is there also because it knows which way to go toward the sun. You know? So it is also struggling for its existence. You've seen the grass growing out between the cracks in the sidewalk. You know, it's trying to push itself up. It wants to live. So it's not just a passive thing like the sidewalk. It's active. It's alive. But they don't know how that works. How to make a blade of grass like that. They can't do it. They can make artificial grass, but that's not alive, is it? They don't know how to produce a seed and how that seed can produce other seeds and other grass. I have no idea. So all we can say is that what Louis Pasteur discovered many years ago, when he said, omnis vivum ex vivum, all life comes from life. It doesn't come from chemicals. You can't put chemicals together and make life. Not just chemistry.
What was this physicist's name again?
Ed Whitten.
Ed Whitten.
Yeah.
I heard of him. He's a philosopher there at Princeton. You know?
Yeah, but I didn't know he had those kind of research interests.
You're also
So
from
you-
Princeton? You're from Princeton?
This is the first time,
Oh,
so I don't know what is the medication.
Medication.
What did you say?
She's first time here, and she don't know what kind of meditation we do.
Oh. We're doing the Maha Mantra. I was explaining to them the Maha Mantra. Maha Mantra is the names of God, but it's Krishna is the name of God in Vedic culture, Indian culture. Krishna is the name of the Supreme Person, the Supreme Personality. You are a person. We are all persons. Where do they come? Where does person come from? Does it come from a stone? Stone is not a person, right? Stone, a piece of grass, a piece of dirt. That's not a person. A molecule, electron, they're not persons, right? So we are persons. Then where did that person come from? So you come from another person, right? Your mother and father, and that's where you come from. No? And we all come from that. We all come from a person. So a person comes from another person. Then who's the first person? That's called Krishna. And that Krishna, the origin of everything can't be impersonal, because we don't know how an impersonal thing can produce a person. So we understand, just by reason, logic, we can understand. I come from a person, and she came from a person, and that person came like that. And if we go all the way back, that's called Adi Purusha. In Sanskrit, Adi Purusha means the first person, the original. That's called Krishna. We can't keep going back and back and back. Well, no, it got anywhere. That's called infinite regression. So we have to stop somewhere. And that original person, you say, well, where did he come from? Well, if you study philosophy like Spinoza or other great philosophers, they'll tell you that there is a person who is not dependent on other persons, who is independent from all other persons, and who creates himself, who is constantly creating himself, constantly making himself anew. It's called self-determination or freedom. That free person is there, exists, the absolute. He is creating himself. He comes from himself. He doesn't come from anything other than himself. And we are coming from him. We are dependent persons. We're not like that. We can't create ourselves from nowhere. We're already coming as we are. Something has made us like that. But he is not like that. He is self-created. And so this mantra is chanting to that Adi Purush. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. He's glorifying that person and his energy and the joy that comes from his own energy, his own joyful energy. Everyone wants to be happy, to enjoy. Where does that come from? Why? Why do we want to be happy? Why do we want to know? Why do we go to school? Why do we have all these colleges and schools and so on? Where does this instinct to know come from? Where does this instinct to become happy? Where does this instinct to live? Why do people struggle to live? Nobody wants to die. I mean, some people who are depressed, but generally, people want to live. You try to kill somebody, they'll resist, they'll run away. Why? Now, somebody might say it's their genes. But genes, why would genes want to live? They have no idea of living. They're not living. Genes don't live. So there's these three instincts. We want to live, we want to be happy, and we want to know. And that says, that in the Sanskrit is told, that is coming from our nature as a soul, as a spirit. The soul is made of three things. It's not, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, something like that. The soul is made of sat-cit-ananda. Sat in Sanskrit and chit-ananda are Sanskrit words. And sat means to be eternal, eternality, sat. And chit means to be conscious, to be knowing something. And ananda means to be blissful, happy, beyond happy. Happiness that never ends and is always increasing. That's called ananda. So because the soul is inherently eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge, when he's in this material body, he wants to live without dying. Wants to go on living. He wants to know. He wants perfect knowledge, to know what he is and what his purpose of life is, and what the whole thing is about. And he wants to be happy, without ever having to feel miserable or unhappy or unsatisfied. It's coming from the soul, these drives that you find here in this world. And not because of, cell reproduction or DNA replication or anything like that. They don't create those kind of feelings in us. Okay. Are you a scientist? No, not a scientist. What do you do?
Finance.
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 You're in finance, okay. So, I mean, you don't know much about this chemistry and all this other thing. Okay. But we're scientists, so that's why I talk about these, because we know something about it. But anyhow, it's the same for everybody can understand. The material world and how it's, acting and interacting. And then there's the spiritual, the self, the person, who is different from the material. And to know the science of that self, why we have the situation that we have, why we're engaged in all these activities, having families, loving our siblings, being faithful to our country, whatever, trying to go to school, why we're interested in learning, finances, whatever we want to know. We're always trying to get some knowledge, some way to manipulate the things for our favor. That's material life. In the spiritual life, all those urges can be fulfilled, but in a very different way, in a transcendental way. Without being so self-centered, they are other-centered or God-centered. Take all our needs and make them the needs in relationship to God. That is called devotion, dedication, love. So we're trying to cultivate that kind of consciousness, that type of awareness, that type of life. And this chanting helps us. This kind of meditation helps us to understand that higher life, beyond just this self-centered existence. And when we can chant alone also, on your own, but we found that chanting in a group, it's called Kirtan or Sankirtan, we sing where we're singing, that type of meditation helps us to concentrate more, to focus our energy more perfectly. And even when you're chanting alone, sometimes when you're chanting alone, you start falling asleep, or your mind will travel on to, I gotta go this, I have to do this, So that type of meditation is not so helpful as when you're chanting together and everybody's getting into it. And there's an inspiration going throughout the whole group for focusing our attention on what we're doing. So we do that type of meditation. Does that answer some of your questions? Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes.
A little bit?
Where did you find out about this group meeting?
My friend told me, and before I just said another friend will come, but today that after she cannot come. So it's another friend. She is from the Indian. She said it's really from the Indian education. So I just say, okay, let me see what the different.
What was your friend's name?
What is your friend's name, he asked you?
Oh, Racina, in the Pennsylvania.
I was wondering if maybe she had come here before and if we would recognize her name.
No.
No. Oh.
She just original from the India, so
Ah.
she heard this one.
Nice.
You're also from India?
Yeah, she from India.
You're from India?
No,
You're from?
from Taiwan.
Taiwan.
We call this mantra meditation. Mantra is the vibrations we speak when we say the mantra.
We just chanted this.
So So instead of sitting quietly with our eyes closed, our focus is on
We'll
singing.
do some chanting again so you can participate. Okay? Well, now we're just talking about general things. If anyone has any specific thing they like to ask me.
So, not being a scientist, doing some of
Okay,
this
good.
classical singing, I know nothing about all the sciences, but so I'm reading the Gita, and it talks about you can show worship to Krishna in any form, and it's acceptable to Krishna. So, do you need to understand all of this and all the inner workings of the Vedantic teachings to show real worship to Krishna? Or does it help? Or
Well,
is it
let me say one thing. That is very difficult to know everything. See? So, because there's a lot there to know. And so, to say that you have to know everything in order to worship Krishna, that would be impossible. But, there's an easy way, and it's told in the Gita. It says you don't have to know everything. But you should approach a guru, a teacher, who may not know everything, but he's authorized to direct you by his guru or by higher authorities. There is something called guru, where we can, by following the instructions of guru, who knows something more than we know, not everything, but something more than we really know, that we can learn to progress in spiritual life. I mean, just like if you go to school, you go to a teacher who knows something more than you do. It's not such a bad thing. It's not such a horrible thing. You know that you get some benefit from going to a teacher who knows a little bit more than you do, maybe a lot more. And then just by learning under them, you can make progress in your own life, right? So it's like that. Guru means a spiritual master, teacher, who learn something about what's there on the higher platform, and they can give us some clarity in our own life about what to do. And that was the method that Krishna mentions in the Gita. If you look at the, I think it's the 4th chapter, Krishna says, Tadvidi paripratena pariprasnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanais tattvadarshana. 4th chapter, I don't remember which verse it is. But he's saying Tadvidi. If Tad means the truth, and Vidi means to know. Tadvidi paripratena. If you want to know the truth, paripratena means become humble, first of all. Recognize that you can't do everything on your own, or you don't have to do everything on your own. Pariprasnena. Humbly ask questions, and seva means serve. Who the tattvadarshana, somebody who has some knowledge or seen some part of the truth, has some connection with that. According to the connection our guru has with the ultimate, then we can make that much progress through his guidance. So that's the way Krishna has told us to learn the truth. If you want to see or know the truth, then you try to take up this process. Try to see yourself in a humble way. Well, that you can approach somebody who may be more knowledgeable than you in these things, and then humbly ask questions, inquire, and serve. Don't only take from Guru, oh, I want this, I want that, I want to know this, I want to know that. That won't help us actually make progress. But if we serve in a very humble way, that will reveal the higher truth to us more readily than trying to grab it ourselves. When we're trying to grab something that's higher than ourselves, we reduce it. It's authenticity. Infinite is not something we can grasp. Otherwise, it's not infinite. We're the infinite. I was reading something where somebody was saying God has a beginning. They were saying, doesn't God have a beginning? I mean, we all have a beginning. Doesn't God have a beginning? Who made God and stuff like that? And so the point was that if God is in time, if God can be captured in time, then time is greater than God. And then how can it be God? God can't be God if time is greater than him. He's in time. God has to be outside of time. Then he's greater than time. Time is within him. So like that. We have to understand that which is higher than ourselves. We are within that. It is not within us. So that infinite has to come to us. That's called Guru. Guru understands that principle. That the infinite is greater than himself. and that he has to be submissive to that. And he can teach us that principle. And if we follow his example and his understanding, then we may come to that position also. Not think that we're doing it on our own. That would be a mistake. We can maintain and develop our ego, rather than suppressing it and understanding our real position as a subordinate. Subordinate to that higher thing. Basically something like that. If we read the Gita, wow, we should follow what he's saying there. He tells us this explicitly. It's a very important part of the Gita that many people don't take seriously. To their own misfortune. And it helps. That is definitely a catalyst in our spiritual life.
Reading the Gita has been very transformative.
It should be. It should change your whole life if you actually read it with some understanding. And Krishna in the end is telling us, Sarva Dharma Parityaja. Means give up everything else. Sarva Dharma means all your other duties, Sarva Dharma, give that up. Parityaja, and Parati means dismiss all that. Tyaga, become a renunciate like that. Mam ekam sharanam vraja means and surrender to me only. Sharana, sharanagati means surrender to me only. You are mine, and you're doing all kinds of things that are not connected with me. And then that you have to give up. Come to me, and then you can understand properly. So it's a very hard thing. You become completely detached from all this mundane thing and try to make your life centered in me. And that's called liberation. Perfect realization.
Maharaj,
Yes.
there is, meditation of various kinds.
I'm sorry.
Meditation of various kinds.
Meditation of Vedic science.
Various kinds.
Various.
Meditating on that particular result. So, what is the best meditation that you suggest?
What do you say?
I was curious.
I'm asking you. You know.
Because I think we living entity don't know what to meditate upon. So maybe the higher message what suggests us to meditate upon, and that we should meditate because we don't know what is our real good.
And so I missed what you said.
We don't know what is our real good.
So
So we cannot find out the object of meditation by ourselves. It has to come from above on what we must be meditating upon.
yes, we are dropped in this world without any information about how we got here, what to do. It's all about. Right? Like giving somebody a very sophisticated computer, not telling them anything about how to use it or what it's for or anything like that. What would you do with it? You can sit on it, use it for a hot plate, right? When you had something that you have to know something about it when you utilize it properly. So Veda is there. Veda is the instruction manual for the human being. The guidance manual. What we should do, how we got here, where we're supposed to go. Those things are given there. Veda. Veda means know or knowledge. And in different religions we find they have all their own scriptures. And according to the mentality and intelligence of the people, they're given different instructions. And the Veda is a very high, elaborate kind of knowledge that we don't find anywhere else. So those who have that deep, scientifically minded type mentality, they can find much to gain in that, much to study in the Veda about all these things in a very scientific way. Understand it. This is a scientific age, so it's very valuable to have such books available. Satisfy the scientific mind. And there it explains all these things. How to meditate, what you should meditate. And that way we practice. So Veda tells us that we're going to be playing with Harinam. Harinam, 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 Harinam. And this way, by chanting the holy names, we can practice meditation in the most beneficial way possible. most beneficial thing to do, as far as chanting is concerned. I would like to give respect to the holy name. I was telling you the name is non-different from Krishna. So anyone will give the holy name an asana.
And so, you mentioned that the Vedantic teachings are the Vedanta is like an instruction manual for the body.
Veda.
The Veda. And so,
Vedanta means the conclusion of all the Veda.
okay.
Conclusive knowledge of all Veda. What is the Vedas all about? Giving it in a concise form. Yeah?
And so, I'm guessing that you have to have an understanding of all of the teachings in order to function.
Like I said, you have to just have a good teacher who knows something about it. That's the best place to start. And from the teacher you can learn more and more. And maybe you'll come to higher knowledge than your teacher by studying. And you'll become the teacher. Possible. But that's the best place to start, with a teacher. And try to learn what you can from there. Otherwise, it's like picking up a book on quantum physics. If you do it on your own, it's very difficult. But go to somebody who knows something about it, it becomes quite, a lot more reasonable. Possible to understand the whole thing. And if you try to understand the whole thing on your own, it becomes very difficult. Especially if you don't know anything about integrals or differential equations or anything. Yeah. So then how you can read that book, So you have to learn from the teacher who can teach you from the ABCs and then go on up. And then it's possible you can also surpass your own teacher. But we don't want to do that because humility, like I said, unless you're humble, the higher things can't be known. You can't appreciate the higher things. You think you're equal to them, with that higher thing. We don't want to ever think that. I'm equal to the higher thing, or it's conceivable by me. That won't make that known to us. You won't be able to realize that higher thing that way. So the stress is put on humility. The more humble you can become, the more that higher reality will become known to you. That's the secret. For realization becomes real to you when you're humble. When you humble yourself, that higher thing will become real to you, become realized automatically. The negative way will bring the positive. The more negative you are, the more the positive thing will be known to you. The more positive you are, the more that negative the more that positive thing will become negative to you, non-existent, and nullified.
So being in difficult circumstances and difficult position is conducive for the progress than to be in all good, all everything is nicely going on.
Not necessarily, but sometimes the difficult situation makes it very difficult for us also to meditate on those higher things. So we want to be in a
Middle.
we want to be in a calm, and my main thing is our sincerity. I would say. Sometimes, as when we're put in difficult situations, we're going in the wrong direction, and individuals will say, "Oh, I'm doing something wrong in my life," and they make a correction. And that way it's helpful. But if it's too difficult, then our minds become disturbed all the time with the difficulties, and we can't meditate on anything more. So the most important thing is our sincerity, to want to actually know. Done with fooling around, wasting time. Take it up seriously.
Maharaj, once you had explained that the consciousness is the negative.
Consciousness is negative.
And that's why it's very hard for the scientists to conceive what consciousness is. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
There are two things, the consciousness and the object of consciousness, what we are conscious of. So what we are conscious of the object of consciousness. That's the positive. And the consciousness that's aware of that thing is the negative in that sense. The object and the consciousness. Consciousness must have something that is conscious of, a content. It's like a bowl, there's a container, and you put stuff in it. There's a content and there's a bowl, right? When you're looking at the content, you don't recognize what the contribution the bowl is making to it. If the bowl is kind of round like this, the content's going to be spread in the same way. If it's a flat fish tank, like, then the content will be, spread out on the surface of it in a flat way. So it'll either be concave or flat or whatever. Or if the bowl is dripping down on both sides and up in the middle, very strange kind of bowl. But you see, the bowl will affect whatever content it has, whatever shape it has. But we usually don't think of the bowl. In science, they don't think of the consciousness. That which is containing the content. They ignore that when they just look at the content. So there's only half the solution. Empty the complete thing. Our consciousness is shaping what we're conscious of. That's the point. So if you look at what we're conscious of, atoms, molecules, electrons, and so forth and so on. That's what we'll see. We'll see what they're part of, what they're making up. Just like the blind men and the elephant. The blind men weren't aware that there was an elephant in the room. They were just feeling around. And they go, oh, here I found a stump of a tree. And one was pulling the tail, said, oh, I found a rope. Another one felt its trunk. Oh, there's a snake here. The other felt the ear. Oh, there's a fan here. The other felt the side. Oh, it's a brick wall here. They couldn't understand what they were in contact with because they couldn't see the whole, of which all those parts were members. So when they put all their thoughts together, they got this, cement wall with tree trunks, being held up by tree trunks with a snake coming out one side and a rope coming out the other. They couldn't understand. So these were the objects of their senses. But the concept, the whole, what the concept was, what they were parts of, they couldn't see that. So everything is a part of something greater. And if you just look at the electrons and atoms and molecules, without understanding what they're part of, you can't really define those things off. The atoms and molecules might be there in an elephant, they might be there in a dog, they might be there in a human being. Same carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, all those things are there. And all those different kind of creatures. But you can't really tell from that level of atoms and molecules what you're dealing with. Okay? What you're actually dealing with. So the content and the consciousness of what you're interested in, where your consciousness is focused on, your interest, that's very much depending on how you understand things, how well you understand things. So unless the consciousness is expanded to understand the whole, what we're part of, what everything, each one of us are only a part of the whole. Unless we understand that connection with the whole, we can't really understand what any of these parts means, and we'll misuse the whole thing. Or we become, we see everybody is the same, a whole bunch of molecules. We lose everything, what the personality is like, what the individuality and uniqueness of everyone is, even our own self. And we don't even begin to believe that there are people, we just think it's just atoms and molecules. So it's very important. Consciousness is a very important contribution to what you're conscious of. And we shouldn't only focus on the objects. We have to also focus on developing consciousness so that we can understand things properly. And that's where Veda comes in.
Consciousness is the form also?
Yes.
So the form in the sense, the form that we see, or the form has another explanation?
Form is not something we see, that's structure.
The structure.
Form, when Plato used the term form, he meant idea. And ideas we don't see. They help us see. They inform what we're going to see. Idea or concept. They have similar meanings, not exactly the same, but they have similar meanings. And they're not sensible. They can't be sensed with seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, something. They inform those things. You might smell something, but until you know what that is, a rose or whatever, it may be burnt toast, you know. That concept has to be there before you start to associate that smell with anything. Otherwise, just a smell, like any other smell.
So how the consciousness, shapes or transforms by, meditation?
That's by our will, our choice. The choice is there. Freedom is there. What we become interested in. If the consciousness is desiring, consciousness means the plane of a desire, actually, platform of desire. When we desire something independent of God or something in relationship to God, that will affect how we see things, how we live our life. What we will concentrate on, what we will focus on, or not, what we will ignore. But
So
consciousness is a fundamental thing. Huh?
it affects both our will and the kind of people we are staying with.
Of course, that will affect us greatly. If you're living with thieves, most likely you'll become a thief. Oh, this is the thing we're supposed to do with our life. If you're living with engineers, you might become an engineer. If you're living with artists, you might become an artist. If you're living with saintly people, you might become a saint.
Yesterday, one lady, when we went out, was asking, "What is this soul?" What is soul? She asked a question like this.
What is soul?
What is the soul? Okay.
So one of the answers that I could think at that time was, you have to think about the thinking substance.
Excuse me. What is it?
You have to think about the thinking substance.
Thinking substance.
And from that you will get some idea of the soul. I try to explain like this.
Okay.
So what do you think, Maharaj?
Yes, we have to think. Everything is based on thinking. What we're thinking, you can say that's how our consciousness is formed. You are what you think you are. So in that sense, thinking is very important to understand what you are. So when you're thinking about who you are, then that who is seeing. Not your body, but who is seeing it in the body. Body doesn't see. The eye doesn't see. We can understand the eye is there in a dead body. It doesn't see anything. Not just an eye organ. Not the whole eye is there, the optic nerve, the brain, everything is there in a dead body, but it doesn't see anything. It come out like this with one blink. And kick him and they won't do anything. That's not the body that's seeing or feeling or anything like that. No, it's something else. So the soul is like that. That's something else. That is seeing, thinking, feeling, willing.
Doesn't the Vedic perspective make a distinction between the mind and the soul? The mind is still a superficial layer of existence, and the soul is a perceiver behind the mind.
Yeah. Mind is the kind of, you can say, is the thing that understands. And understanding is based on limited knowledge, like we're saying. If you only know molecules, atoms, and things like that, then your understanding of things will be based on that. That's your mind. Mind does something like this. If you see a red ball, a big red ball, and a small red ball, now, The eye sees the red ball, the big red ball and the small red ball, but it doesn't know that there's one is big and one is small. Eyes don't make that kind of decision. Eyes only see things. But to compare one with the other, where does that come from? Eyes don't compare. They're not a brain. They're not the brain. You don't compare by just by seeing, even by touching. Touching doesn't compare. It just feels this and it feels that. But how does it know one is big and one is small? Where does that come from? And that's the mind. Understand? Mind has its functions that are operating all the time, but we're not aware of that. We think it's the eyes that are seeing. As I explained, it can't be the eyes that see, because an eye is not sufficient for seeing. The organ itself is not sufficient.
Actually, in science also they think there is a relationship between structure and function. Something like, DNA is there and is doing thing. But Shapiro, saying that equation, DNA plus 0 is 0. And then DNA does not do anything. It is a cell which uses DNA to do those things.
That's another thing. But we're talking about mind, trying to say what is the difference between mind and consciousness. What do you understand about that?
I mean, mind, we think that, sankalpa and vikalpa, it can only give some, facility for reasoning whether it has to be done or not. It cannot come to a conclusion. And consciousness has to be more with, what you can say, the awareness, the way, the subject is related to the world.
Well, I mean, you can change your mind. You heard of that before, right? Heard of that? Make up your mind?
No, I've never heard of. Oh yeah, now that maybe no, I haven't.
That means you're aware of your mind. Consciousness is above the mind. Consciousness can be aware of what the mind is doing, what the mind is feeling like, and it can change it. So you change your mind. Then what is knowing that? Is it the mind, or is it something more than the mind that's understanding? I changed my mind. You understand?
It seems to me there is some very intrinsic relationship between desire and mind. Because in one place, Sridhar Maharaj explains, mind is like the impulse. Suddenly it goes like this. So, but then there is faculty of intelligence and the faculty of ego also. And the intelligence can check the mind, that means the impulse. But that intelligence is not exactly the impulse. It is that impulse is the mind, and then what you are explaining from that your perspective, mind is which separates to understand.
The mind is an object of consciousness. In other words, what my mind is doing, thinking, feeling, willing, I'm all conscious of that. Mind is thinking, feeling, willing. I'm conscious that I'm thinking. When you're thinking something, you're conscious, I'm thinking. When you're conscious of feeling something, you say, I'm feeling angry, or this or that, the other thing, right? When you're want to do something, you want to do it, that's your will. I'm willing to do this, yes. So there's something that's knowing that there's thinking, feeling, willing going on. So it's the object of what? That's consciousness. So the mind is the object of consciousness, not the consciousness itself. That's it. As much as, seeing the floor, you're conscious that your eyes are seeing the floor. So your consciousness is aware of your mind is thinking now, or is a little confused, or is seeing things clearly, or whatever your mind decides. Yes, I'm learning something here. Whatever.
So Maharaj, you told this woman on the street that the mind or the thinking process?
Thinking substance.
The soul is what? The thinking process?
You have to think, what is this thinking substance? And then you can begin to realize something about the soul. Who is doing the thinking? Who is feeling certain things? And who is, like, we talk about substance only in terms of, atoms and molecules in general. But if there is some substance which is thinking, then certainly molecules are not those. And what is that substance? And what is its, nature? What is its ontology? And how can we know that? These are the questions.
Some panpsychism people, they think, how can you say that atom and molecules are not thinking? They think that everything is thinking thing. They say like that. how can you know
What
somebody?
do they think?
Huh?
What do they think? You ever talked to one?
Yeah, I have talked to few people who are panpsychism. They say that.
But I'm saying, have you ever talked to an electron? What are they thinking? If they're thinking, what do they say? Have to say? I'd be interested. No, an electron is a thought. That's all it is. Electron is a thought. You can't see an electron. It's something they think is there. It's a thought. Nobody's ever seen an electron. No one. Because even according physically, it's too small for anything to interact with it in order to reveal it. You can shine a light, a photon will disturb the electron, even destroy it. So you can't bounce a photon off an electron and see where it is or what it's doing. So nobody knows what an electron is. They just think it's there. They think it's a particle. And even in quantum mechanics, they don't even think it's a particle now. They think it's a cloud. Probability cloud. That's all they can say about it. It's a probability cloud, possibility. So it's a thought. Then, how can a thought be thinking? Well, that's possible.
That
Thought can think itself. Huh?
That what they say, that is applicable to all the things that we want to know, even other subject,
Yeah.
even the other human being. How we know that he's thinking? So we cannot know that. That's what their argument is. We cannot know even the other person.
Well, how do I know you're thinking?
Because I think.
Because you're exhibiting some kind of behavior that I associate with thinking. Right?
Yeah.
Electrons, what behavior? I mean, what property in electrons would we presume that they were thinking? But I mean, they have spin, they have mass, they have charge, they have, whatever.
Speed of light.
Huh?
Speed of light.
Yeah, but where does thinking come in that? So, unless they can explain those things, I can't
Even dead body, man.
just say, yes, everything is thinking.
Even a dead human body. Even you don't know if that logic, whether dead body is thinking or not thinking.
So philosophers have come up with a better explanation than that. They consider matter to be petrified intelligence, Schelling. Schelling said matter is petrified intelligence that has been stunted, whatever you want to call it. Right? Matter is just dead, like devoid of consciousness. I told Muni Mars, attenuated consciousness. When you turn the volume level down to 0, the sound vanishes. When you turn it up, the sound comes, right? So when the sound is down to 0, then there's no sound. We call it silence. That's matter. Matter is with 0 consciousness, the level of 0 consciousness, what we are conscious of. Then consciousness comes when the higher species, an ant, an insect, a blade of grass, animal, bird, like that, fish, human being. They all have some consciousness of those things that are devoid of consciousness. But the devoid of consciousness doesn't mean it's something different from consciousness. It means just consciousness is 0 at that point.
Something, the scientists have found out, like Shapiro and other cell biologists, about the intelligence in the cell, the kind of choices.
Yes.
So from that they are saying it is conscious.
Yes.
So there is some kind of discrimination that came to make that that conclusion that cell is also sentient.
That's basically what a life is. It's conscious. What they're calling biomolecules, that is only moments of consciousness. Different elements, different objects. What do you call the reality of consciousness is manifested in that way. But they're not. Nobody can say that DNA molecules and the different polymers and enzymes and proteins in the cell are real. Because that's not the way they're acting. They're not acting like chemicals. They're exhibiting the life force even at that level. That life is there. Life is the fundamental principle that is acting in the cell, subcellular region. So also life is acting there.
they're talking with each other, they say.
Whatever, they're life, they're alive. It's not dead matter in there. There's a life there. And that's what we're seeing. They call it this, that, and the other thing. That's not what it is. Can't be. Because they can't take those things and make a life with that. Can't take DNA, proteins, and all these other things and make, create a living cell. Because that's not what a living cell is. Not made of those things. You understand? There's a substance there called what we call life. That's a mystical substance, and not chemical, not physical. That's the illusion.
The law,
The biological illusion goes on in Maharaj called it. The biological illusion of life. That's what it is.
The laws of physics and chemistry, which supposed to, control the matter that they are, discussing in science. But in quantum mechanics, they found that, it is not so readily applicable, those laws.
That's right.
So some scientists, started arguing panpsychism, concept that, okay, because it is not following that pattern that they conceived, so they think that, okay, that is also, conscious. Some, like free will is there. Some scientists saying, oh, electron has free will because,
Scientists are disagreeing with one another. They don't even know what they were talking about. From the quantum physicists to the biologists, the quantum physicists are saying there's no particles, and the biologists are saying there's so many different particles that are interacting with. Science is in a crisis, in a critical situation. And there is no clear scientific understanding of what is what. Very confusing, very conflicting. Many, many problems. From the astronomy to the subcellular atomic
subatomic particle level.
Huh?
Subatomic particle level.
That's why science is facing a situation where they're ready for a revolution, an understanding, and hopefully that revolution will be spiritual revolution. Beginning to wake up, understand what's going on better from a spiritual perspective. That's a change of heart, change of consciousness. My Mahaprabhu's grace, it's come for that purpose, to save everyone. So it must be fulfilled.
Once you have told that organismic idea of life is not so much complete.
What's this?
Organismic conception of life. The
organismic conception of life is not complete. Yes. Because he is also the organism is also part of a greater whole, and then an ecological system. So just understanding the organism is not enough. You have to understand how it's also part of an environment. That's why we don't like this Darwin idea, saying that life can somehow form, even in a dead environment. So that somehow a life came out. What would it eat? If in order for a life to come, there has to be an environment where it could survive also. Not just a life can come all of a sudden by some accident, and then there's nothing to eat. So to have life, you have to have the environment for it. Everything has to be there. And once, not just to concentrate on one isolated living entity. At once soul understand the real situation. And that extends out up to God. That knowledge has to come.
Original cause.
Yes, that has to come also into the picture. This is the problem. They kind of, focus on a microscopic vision. That's not good. It's like that elephant. You might don't go down to the toenails of the elephant, and you wonder what they are without knowing the leg and the elephant and the whole thing.
They cannot study it. How can they study accept that process? If they want to study by their own ability,
because that's what they want. That's what they're willing to do. That's what they're willing to give their life for. And you get what you want. Ye yatamam prapadyante. Tam's the type of bhajanam. Krishna says in the Gita, what you want, I give you. Man proposes, God disposes. You want that? You can get that. If you want me? You can get me also. Yes, that's right.
So I'm still not totally,
Okay.
still not totally
Clear.
comfortable with your conception, your bigger conception of what you're presenting to the scientists. But basically, I get the impression that the most that you can give to them is to prove to them that they're at a dead end.
Did there what?
They're at the dead end.
They're at a dead end, yes.
You can't use their scientific process to prove that they're wrong. You sort of just take them so far, they reach a dead end.
Yeah, you just
say-
show what the defects they're having. Try to
And
figure
then,
out.
you immediately then jump to the Vedic explanation of reality. But the Vedic explanation is only one amongst dozens
Yeah.
of different
Yeah.
religious conceptions in the universe.
It's true. The only thing you can hope for from anyone is that they have faith. And that's what you need to get to that next stage. They have faith in what they're doing, and you have to have faith. They have to change their heart. They change their heart. Their faith has to change from what they're doing to what the Vedas are saying. And it's the only way you can reach there. Everything is based on faith. Your whole consciousness, the form of your consciousness is going to take is based upon your faith. The whole identity that you have is based on faith.
But in our tradition, the faith in the Vedas, as opposed to faith in the Bible, or faith in the Quran.
You can have
faith
faith in anything. You have faith in the Bible or whatever. So get that whatever faith you have, that's where your consciousness will go. That's where your understanding and knowledge will develop from, or develop into. Whether you have faith in science, you have faith in Christianity, you have faith in Buddhism, you have faith in Krishna, your consciousness will develop accordingly. That's what Krishna means. Ye yatamam prapadyante. You know that verse in the Gita? Ye yatamam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham. I reward for each person according to how much surrender or faith you have in them. That reward comes in the form of your consciousness, how it develops. And then you say, man proposes and God disposes. Everybody might want to be a millionaire. But not everybody becomes a millionaire. That's depending on a lot of different circumstances. And we could say that God allows that to happen. Because, well, we can't figure out all those circumstances to produce such a life, such a achievement in life, if you want to call it that. It is an achievement. But it comes not by just wishing it. We have to surrender to the whole process that makes a millionaire a millionaire.
It still seems like there's a disjoint in the argumentation, though. You take them so far, convince them that they have to give up on the materialistic, mechanistic view of the universe.
Well,
And
so
then you jump to the Vedas.
No, we could say, what we do is we point out the deficiencies. Like, for instance, in, what do they call that? Paleontology. Paleontology, where they study the fossils or things like that. All right, so the modern theory of Darwinian evolution is based on the fact that the fossils start at some primitive stage and they develop gradually. With the different layers, you see different body developments. Well, recently in China, they found some Changjian deposit, something like that. And most of the fossils are just with bones. You don't see any fleshy parts because of the time periods. All the flesh has disappeared, and only the bones. Actually, the bones aren't even there. It's just replaced with certain minerals. So anyhow, in this Changjian deposit, they found not only the bones but also the tissue alive. And what they discovered was that the what are considered the most recent forms were found at the earliest stages in those deposits. So that what actually happened is that they turned Darwin upside down, and said that the things that are considered latest were the first, and the things that were supposed to be first came later, according to the deposits there. So we sent that message, I don't know if you saw it, to our group, to all the scientists. And they were speechless. They never heard of that before, because nobody ever presented that data to them.
That was
That
carbon
would
dating.
contradict darling, huh?
No,
Carbon
sir.
dating?
Paleontology.
Huh?
Carbon dating? They did by carbon dating?
No
those tissues?
carbon dating, no, this is before, you can't, carbon dating only goes so far, before that, you can't do it.
No, but how did they know this tissue is earlier than?
Because they can see it, it's visible. And the layers, you go down deeper.
The rate of
you find these-
deposition.
You find these later forms down deeper, and the earlier forms down, up on the, So it just reversed the whole thinking of the Darwinian evolution scheme. And like that, you just presented them, then whatever they want to do with that, they can, but it shows that Darwin evolution, that's what we're saying, Darwin evolution isn't a fact. It's not based on evidence. If there's something wrong with what they're saying about that. And then we give the evidence for that. And then the other thing is that, they've been trying to put molecules together to discover how the origin of life came about, and they're experimenting with making different molecules. And they haven't been able to say anything about how life was formed by that process. So they just have to throw their hands up and say, well, we don't know. And
Outer space, it came from outer space. It came from outer space.
You point this, you point out this.
Transparent,
We don't have to say anything more than that. They have to understand that what they were thinking, there's something wrong with it. That's the conclusion they have to reach. So it's up to them to make the change if they want. Otherwise, they'll say, oh, there's something missing, like I gotta do this or that or the other thing. Anyhow, the other thing is, we can point out the evidence. Look, where did you come from? You came from a living person. And where did they come? They came from a living person. Where does life? Does life come from molecules, chemicals, or does it come from another living person? Did you come from a chemical? Does anyone do you know came from a chemical? Is anyone in your family? Lineage all the way back, did they come from chemicals? What happened? How did this all start? But what we see is that life comes from life. That's observable. Why do we make a theory that life came from matter when we can't observe that? How is that scientific? Or is that ideological? Understand? Is it an ideology that life came from matter, even though we can't see it, observe it scientifically? Or is it more scientific to say that life comes from life, which we can observe every day? Which is more scientific, like that, or present that argument to them. What they want to make with it, that's up to them. But we present the argument and possibly put some doubt into their thought. And by accumulating evidence like that and arguments like that, we try to challenge what they're currently thinking, and leave it up to them to make the decision afterwards. And then we present the Vedic view as an alternative that explains things very nicely. All those things that they're observing, all those facts that are there, we show that supports the Vedic position.
Even in Gita Maharaj,
I'm sorry?
even in Bhagavad Gita,
Yeah.
Krishna first tells many things.
I'm sorry?
Krishna first tells Arjuna many things, like jnana and all those things.
Yes.
And Arjuna feels that it is not compatible to what he wants to achieve. Then he tells the final thing, to surrender. I mean, he knows, first he tells, these things you can try, but it can go up to that much.
So ultimately, the person has to decide themselves. We can explain some different points that they may not think about, or they may not care to consider. But when you present it to them, then it's up to them whether they want to change their position or feel that it has to be modified in some way, or even possibly look at the Vedic proposition. Prabhupada said something like that. He said, we propose that life comes from life. And we appeal to your reason with this proposal. That's all you can say. And it's up to them if they want to make that, like you say, transition or jump. Sure. We can't do that for anyone. We can't even do it for another devotee.
We cannot eat for somebody else.
They have to make that decision.
And one more point is that not only is a question of religion that we talk about faith, but the science itself, faith is an integral component of scientific progress.
I'm sorry?
Faith is an integral component of scientific progress. Faith is an integral component of.
So when we say that you have to have faith, we don't say something like which is like
Something unreasonable.
unreasonable, because if they follow that, they will get some
Exactly.
proof of that. And the other thing I was thinking, Maharaj, they are always asking questions. How do we know that other person is conscious? Yes, I can feel that I am conscious, but about the others, this is the first person perspective problem. But in the Vedic conception, we have the concept of the Antaryami, or the indweller. The indweller or the Antaryami. There is a again, Paramatma aspect, like even Lord Shiva also, and Lord Krishna, they are indwelling. And there are great sages who have that capacity, who can enter their heart. So, and then it seems that the question of the other, not only the me, but the other who is conscious. So it seems that in consciousness there must be some capacity to know that other is also conscious. Otherwise,
You know, it happens exactly the other opposite way. Hegel explains this. It happens exactly the other way. We see another person, and we come up with the idea or the theory that they are conscious.